And can we please fight the temptation to speculate and gossip? Speculation is never helpful in times like this. If you have more thoughts than what the family has chosen to communicate to you, keep them to yourself. It is not helpful. In fact, it is harmful when you allow your speculations to pour out of your mouth for others to wrestle with gossip. You are not loving anyone better because of that.
A Riverside pastor who reached out to people coping with depression and suicidal thoughts has taken his own life. 30-year-old Jared Wilson was a founder of the outreach group Anthem of Hope.
Much of the talk is growing due to the growing number of mental health suicides in the country, with some well-known megachurch pastors like Jared Wilson, who took his life Monday after years of battling depression and being an advocate for those suffering.
A former Nashville pastor who was an advocate for mental health,
leaving behind his wife and 2 kids.
But with more church leaders taking up the issue.
What is mental health? Like how do we define it? How do we speak to it biblically?
I think we have to stop thinking of mental illness and emotional distress and those kinds of things as being a failure, but being a part of being human.
And so I recognize that I am speaking to all of that, and I do ask that you would extend me grace as I step into such complexity and such tension. My heart for you, my heart for Darren and Amy. Though that's the movement and that's the end, we also recognize that we live in that gap. The gap of a broken world, a world filled of depravity, darkness, sin, cancer and COVID-19, destruction, and even death.
Next phase of this crisis might be a mental health one. A study published today says that the United States could have an additional 75,000 deaths, not from COVID-19 directly, but despair.
When it was cut beyond time that you would think there's more for him to experience. And I would say for many of us, that's what we see as, Darren, it was untimely. It doesn't make sense when you have a beautiful wife and 4 young kids. It doesn't make sense when you have energy in you and there's ministry to be had. It doesn't make sense when we felt like your next chapter was beginning to be written. It doesn't make sense. It's untimely. Death never makes sense, but especially during those times. So when a leader like this dies, it is deeply felt. It profoundly hurts. So the question is, and it really always is, how do you process? Even if you've experienced this at some point before, when it happens again, you almost forget, how do we process this? And for many of us, this is the first time we have felt such a spiritually influential person leave this earth. That there are things you don't know, and for many of us, you'll never know. And so we can be tempted to wrestle. If I know a little bit more, I can do better. And we don't know the confirmed cause, but we do know what it appears to be. And we don't know what Darren was thinking in that moment. And we never will. But what I'd like to speak to, if there was a very real moment where the whisper of the enemy became really loud, where the silent struggles hit the surface, where the voice that seeks to rob of life and joy became too much to bear. Don't know what happened in his last moment. But for you and for me, who struggle in those ways, who have those silent struggles, you are not alone. He called him into this life of faith in that he would be accepted not in his own merits. God is not in awe of all your works for him. What he most desires is intimacy, and works flow out of that. What he most desires is not what you do, it's you. He's coming. He is coming. He is coming. There is a day, a perfect future, when our King will come and he will fully, for the rest of time, fully establish his unshakable, unconquerable, eternal kingdom on earth. And that all things will be made right again. And this incomprehensible glory will so shift our paradigm that all the pain and the loss and the tears here, somehow over there, he will just make it, he'll allow it to make sense for us. When our lives reflect something that might measure differently, we don't judge the gospel from that. We judge that from the gospel. The gospel never fails to be what it is. So this moment doesn't undermine the gospel. In fact, it undergirds the reality that we live in a broken world as fallible people, but that God saw fit to even save us. So from this moment forward, what do? We press on toward the mark of the high calling of Christ. We press on because the story of the journey didn't start with me and you. It didn't even start with Darren. It started with God. And he still sees fit to use us to keep spreading seeds of life and truth and light into this dark world. Sermons like this, I tell people it's hard to handle nuances. So what I would ask you for grace to don't hear what I didn't say. Don't add to more than what I said. Because at the end of the day, here's what I said.